Whether you like it or not, politics affects our life dramatically.
We woke up this morning with news that AWS is having a significant outage.
I am back to my monochromatic shirts.
Good morning, Peter.
Hey, good morning, David. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. It's another Monday morning.
It is another Monday morning. It's amazing how fast they actually come.
It is. But you and I aren't having the kind of Monday that some folks at Amazon Web Services are having right now.
They are having a bad morning.
Yes. So it is. It's a Monday in October. We woke up this morning with news that AWS is having a significant outage, and my initial reaction was, all right, well, it's unfortunate, but it happens. Another outage, and then I started looking at the list of impacted companies. And I realized there are a lot of AI providing companies on there. Perplexity, for example, was down entirely for a while. So it's like, whoa, that's interesting. So let's talk about what dependency on cloud providers means in the era of AI.
It's our dependency on tech services just in general is going, obviously our lives depend upon a lot of this technology. And if you're dependent on a single cloud provider, and it goes down, AWS. And this is not the first time. It's happened several times. You're kind of out of luck at that point. I know even the Ring cameras were down this morning and everything, so security for a lot of people was not available. There's quite a few issues with having a single AWS or a single cloud provider.
Yeah, and not to bash AWS, because it has happened to most of the cloud providers at one time or another that outages happen. And it's still too early in this outage to assign any blame. We have no idea what happened. For all I know, it could have been, a truck driving into a utility pole outside a data center. Who knows, right? It could have been something outside their control. But having said that, I think it is interesting, because I think people often overlook the fact that when we're doing AI, increasingly we're dependent on cloud providers for this. And this is, I think, somewhat more prevalent in our current era of generative AI than it was in past AI, right? Like when you were building AI solutions at banks, I'm assuming, like many of the solutions I saw, many of those were running on-prem, right?
Well, they were all on-prem. Yeah, everything was on-prem. Nothing was removed from off-premises. So you bring up a great point. Let's use banks as for instance, because they're big users of cloud services these days. You're using AI or generative AI. Look, most deployments these days are really in the cloud. You tend not to deploy on-prem because of the expense. And the assumption is that the cloud providers are better at, internal in-house doing it. Now using ChatGPT, Claude, whatever model you're choosing, you're dependent upon that for trading, argument's sake. All of a sudden, a lot of your services for helping you do trades is not working. What do you do? And the market opens up, and all of a sudden these core, these core systems that you need are no longer there.
And it's interesting, because I think it was much more feasible to run things on-prem in the pre-generative AI era, because let's face it, we spent a lot of resources and hardware and software costs training models, but the execution of the model was not terribly resource intensive, right?
Right.
And you look at GenAI today and inferencing, and just the whole way these models work is, while it's mind-blowingly cool, it's also shockingly brute force and inefficient in terms of the way that the inferencing gets done.
Oh, and it's incredibly costly from a CPU and GPU perspective. The amount of processing power, raw processing power that's needed to make these things work efficiently is just anything like we've ever experienced when we were working in the banks. It's just unbelievably expensive.
So short term, what do you think you could do if you were a company and you're deploying generative AI in something that's, arguably mission critical? Let's say it's on a really important customer facing tool that your customers interact with. What would you do to try to insulate yourself from possible cloud provider outages?
As much there are some things you clearly can do. Look, you can pick multiple cloud providers, and I think most of the larger organizations are hybrid in nature. They have multiple cloud providers, but not all. That's easier said than done, because the infrastructure is always different. If you're just using a model, it's a lot easier. Or I think, look at the case of AWS, make sure you deploy in multiple regions. That mitigates some of the risk associated with this, but not all the risk. Like, I don't know, this current outage, I don't know if it was just an East Coast risk? I mean, outage or it was a global? I have no idea. So
I think it was
that's
US East 1 was what was reported, but I'm not sure. It's early. It's only been going on for a few hours, so I'm not sure I understand the full scope of it. And yeah, I think, deploying across multiple regions and having some sort of a failover process is really important. What I also wonder, though, is this maybe lends a little bit more support to the idea that of these specialized inferencing hardware. And I wonder if we'll ever get to the point where this specialized inferencing hardware is actually affordable and can run on-prem, or whether it's always going to be something that you have to use through a cloud provider.
Well, you bring up a great point. I think it will at some point, and there are a lot of chip manufacturers out there looking to make inferencing chips, and there are other third-party inferencing system, what do you call, infrastructures out there. Cerebras is one that comes to mind. Groq with a Q is another one that comes to mind, and they make proprietary inferencing chips. And AMD is now trying to get into that business as well, and a number of other providers. But the sheer volume of chips that you need to do this effectively is just so high. All with the biggest organizations, I don't think are going to do that. But you look at what we did in the banks. We had two geographically disparate data centers. I think because people assume you're in the cloud, you're by default isolated. That is not the case, because for all you know, you could be sitting in a single data center. That doesn't give you, it doesn't give you fault tolerance. You have to be in multiple data centers. Minimally have to be in multiple data centers.
Yeah. And the promise of some of these inferencing chips is that they will be far more efficient at inferencing. They won't be anything that you would use for training a model, but that they would inference very effectively, because GPUs for training aren't particularly efficient. They're the best we have, but they're not optimized. They're far better at, I think I might have said it backwards, but GPUs are far better at training models. They're not very good at inferencing. They're better than a regular chip, but they're not particularly efficient at it.
Well, I honestly don't think they're really efficient at either one of them. I think there is a lot of room for growth, and there's a lot of other software and hardware vendors out there that are trying to make them more efficient. And by that I mean they're making, I know we're kind of off on a tangent here, but we're trying to make the data for training much more accessible locally to the chip, so they can not wait for information to be available. And that's a big reason that they're not as efficient. But you're right, the inferencing chips, the ones that they're coming out with, are these huge wafers. They're orders of magnitude faster than using GPUs for doing inferencing, and they're a lot better and cheaper too, as well. So,
and to your point about making the data more readily available, I saw recently that demand for fiber, as reported by Corning, has been going up because data centers are upgrading to the latest, fastest fiber, because they want to be able to reduce the latency of moving data in and out of the CPU for processing through AI. So,
you remember the days of dark fiber when they had laid all this fiber and it was all unutilized? And everyone was freaking out. Oh my God, we got dark fiber. It's fiber that's not being used. What are we going to do? We spent all this money. Yeah, those days are gone.
Yep. We've like everything, we've expanded to fill all available capacity and then some.
And then some. And now we're going to go more and more and more and more. It's just amazing how fast these things are progressing these days, and the amount of money. It's just utterly frightening sometimes how fast it's coming out. But anyway, I know that was one topic that we kind of wanted to riff on about for a little bit. And, I think the other thing we wanted to talk about a little bit is, since we always tend to speak about it at the end of our podcast, not probably the wisest move, is we have a bunch of guests coming up. And I think some of which, we won't mention their names yet, but I think you'll be really happy with who we have. I think the conversations are going to be awesome. They are, a disparate set of individuals with very different perspectives. So it's not always the David and Peter show. And I think they take a different view, and I think there'll be some really, really, really good conversations there.
Absolutely. And I think we can foreshadow a little bit of what we're having. And, to echo what you said, I'm super excited about some of the people coming on. And we're going to be talking to someone who works in the medical field about the intersection of human thinking and the way our brains work and AI, and, how we as humans can coexist with AI. That's going to be a fantastic conversation. We have another really interesting one coming up where we're going to talk about education and AI, and how all of these two worlds are coming together, and it's something we've chatted a little bit about before. I can't wait for that. And then we're going to have a really interesting one with someone who works at deploying AI and other solutions in small and medium businesses. And we'll talk about sort of war stories from the front lines about what they're really seeing and some of the challenges and how those are getting approached. So I think totally great to be having this many guests. I'm excited about hearing what they have to say and learning something.
Yeah, learning something. I think for us, it's about learning. And I say this to everybody else out there as well. If you think you're a great guest, please reach out to us. We're happy to entertain that. We like speaking to other people and getting out of a little, I don't know, what do you call it? We don't call it our, it was the word
Our
I'm looking
bubble?
for, David.
I don't
What?
know. Are we in a social media bubble?
Yes, our
I hope
bubble, our little bubble. That's what we're in. We're a little bubble. We tell each other stuff. So I don't want other people to tell us we're wrong.
it's the smallest bubble in the world. It's just two people. Um, and I forgot one of the guests I'm also very excited about is someone who has described themselves as a digital artist working in
Yeah,
AI. So I think
yeah,
that is going to be a terrific conversation as well. So yeah, we have a lot of good guests coming up. Always looking for more. So as Peter
yeah.
said, if you
Please,
think you have something to say, if you want to come on and challenge us or teach us about something, we'd
please do.
love to talk to you.
Yeah,
So
please do. And we're going to do a number of these in a studio, a real podcast studio. So we'll be face to face, which is, we tried it last week. I think it was awesome, and I think
yeah,
we'll be doing more of that.
yeah, yeah. So looking forward to those.
And
But in
notice
the
I am no
meantime,
what?
it's
No,
just
go ahead.
us. Yeah.
It's just us, and I am back to my monochromatic shirts, and you're back to wearing.
Peter, you've regressed. You're
You
back to your
know,
single
I
color
was looking
shirts.
for it this morning. I had a Halloween shirt that the kids had bought me years ago, and apparently I must have thrown it out because I was going to put that on.
Well, you still
And I
have
was going to
time.
surprise you, and I was going to surprise you, and lo and behold, I couldn't find it. I was very upset because it was
That's
an
okay. You can wear
obnoxious
it next.
Halloween shirt.
You can wear it next Monday.
All right, I'll see if I can find it.
All right. You have a week to
Anyway,
find one. Um,
so
so yeah, you want to cover off a few other quick
yeah,
topics?
we got a few short topics before we go into the meat of the conversation. Today's a little bit of a mishmash of things because a bunch of interesting things popped up, and I'll keep this one really short. I think we try not to inject politics into this conversation, but I think sometimes, unfortunately, the intersection of AI and politics is there, and you have to have the conversation because whether you like it or not, politics affects our life dramatically, very often. But this is one area where there seems to be a lot of what do you call bipartisan support for AI regulations, and there's a number of senators on both sides of the aisle that are trying to pass some regulations. One of them is called the No Fakes Act, trying to ban deep fakes, and there's a lot of other safety type of regulations that they're trying to pass. And I think when they poll the population, they get the general consensus that people are interested and really want some AI regulation. Now, I'll pontificate for 2 seconds and then I'll toss this back over to you. You know my feeling on politicians regulating things that they don't understand. And I think that's generally a bad thing. And and the reason I tend to say that is because our global competition is not going to do that. And we don't want to stranglehold all the AI companies that are starting, much like Europe did. So I'm very cautious about these things. And when I see the parties that are involved on both sides, not going after either one here, they both lack I think, knowledge to make any kind of decent regulations that are not going to strangle the industry. That's my fear. With that,
So
I will end.
yeah, it's an interesting question because on the surface of it, the premise of the No Fakes Act, which says that you cannot use someone's AI generated likeness, their voice, their image, video of them, etc., without their permission. That strikes me as eminently reasonable and desirable, right? Like we were talking before about how many, children are being harmed or bullied by AI generated content of them, how easy it is to create a fake video. I mean, I could create a video of you holding up a Dunkin' Donuts, waving a slice of pizza around or something. And it would look incredibly convincing, unless someone knows you and knows that you probably don't eat donuts or pizza very often. Yeah, hey, nothing wrong with pizza.
Yes.
But I agree with you. I think that the devil is in the details, and too often well-intentioned laws start off with the right objective and they get sort of tortured by too many chefs in the kitchen and lose focus. I I'm still scarred from my days at multiple banks working on writing policies around data
Hmm.
and AI and other things. And what starts as
Yes.
a very simple exercise where you write what you think is a clear policy statement ends up with trying to balance input from 50 or 60 different people who are all attached to their specific phrases and ways of saying things. Way too often, these policies come out unreadable, unintelligible,
Oh, I
and
know.
sort of useless, right? Because you just let too many voices into the room and you are trying to please everybody. And the only
Yep.
way to do this at the end of the day is to give a very small number of people the pen. And
And keep it simple, and
yeah,
as not vague as possible. And I remember, my days. I remember when Enron blew up and they passed the law, and I can't remember what name of the law. With they passed. And I remember it was a 40-page law. It wasn't big, but there was one section. There was one. I think there was actually literally two paragraphs in this 40 page document that was available that was vague. But it was that paragraph that every single consulting firm and every single accounting firm on the planet drove a truck through. And that they use that very vaguely worded paragraphs to drive regulation and onerous compliance and regulation requirements across the board that were nonsensical, were not spelled out in any document. But this is my fear with this. You're going to make them so it sounds nice to get rid of fakes in theory, but the devil's in the details because you can't. There's no practical way of doing that today. There's zero practical way of actually accomplishing that. There's no technical capabilities that are going to prevent you from making fakes. They do things today to prevent you from uploading pictures and things like that. But you're a half decent software developer. You can download any one of these models and do whatever you want with, and that's not going away.
well, I think to me, the key thing is if they make it illegal, you can prosecute people who are harming other people, actively, intentionally harming other people. The challenge, of course, is who has the liability. And to me, the liability should be on the person who creates the likeness, not
It's
the AI company that powers it, not the people that make the hardware, not the people that made the wiring in the building that turned on the lights that ran the hardware, right? It's
right,
got to be on the
exactly.
actual person who makes it. But so
Right.
I'll be watching this to see what happens with this. Is this something that is now going to the White House for signing,
No,
or
not yet, not yet.
okay?
There's even questions that'll even get passed. To be totally
Ah,
honest, the
okay.
current administration is pushing hard back on some of these things because they recognize that there are. You remember when the internet came out, they specifically said we're not going to regulate it. That was their goal. We're not regulating the internet. They put a moratorium on regulation for over a decade, and you see how. Look, I go back to think if in fact they'd regulated, they would have killed it before it was even born. But they let it grow. Yeah, there were bad things that happened, but mostly look at revolutionized our way of living and created massive amounts of wealth.
Yeah. I would argue in the case of the internet, and that's another whole conversation, though, that it's mature enough and well entrenched enough that we are overdue for some regulation, or maybe not more regulation, but maybe rolling back some of the current regulation that insulates content providers and cloud providers from some of the liability for what they put on the internet, right? That we need to do. But back to your point about harming our competitive situation, it is remarkable how much AI has become a matter of national security and national global competitiveness.
Right, right.
I saw an article over the weekend in which the CEO of one of the major US auto manufacturers had returned from touring some plants in China and was gobsmacked. That's my term, not theirs. Gobsmacked about just how advanced Chinese robotics had become, and raised the alarm upon returning to the U.S. that are we trailing China in robotics? Very interesting
Yeah, that's
article,
interesting.
interesting
They
concept.
have gotten. Yeah, no, they may leaps and bounds in terms of it. Look, my question to that is always and has been how much of it was legitimate. Look, I have questions about intellectual property, but that's a whole other discussion. But on the surface, between electric vehicles and robotics and advanced robotics, they are making massive gains. How they got there as fast as they did, I think is a different question, but they are making massive gains. And I
And it's
guess,
interesting to me because even if you steal or appropriate or borrow someone else's intellectual property. In the case of what we've seen with electric vehicles, some forms of AI work, and reportedly robotics, it's not just stealing and replicating it at lower cost. They're improving it. So
Yeah, no, 100%.
I give the Chinese researchers and developers massive credit, because whether or not they took the easy way to get to a starting place, there's no doubt that they have raised the bar. They have improved the capabilities dramatically. I mean, Chinese electric vehicles are
way beyond
tremendously competitive in Europe, and we don't have them here currently. And if we did, I think Tesla would probably never sell another car.
They have done. It's funny because electric cars really, other than Tesla, the other manufacturers just haven't taken off in the States. I mean, Rivian's struggling like hell. China has, and look, some of their vehicles are, I hate to say it, really good looking. They're very sexy, sport car looking vehicles. They're great. I mean, look, I never drove one, so I don't know, but they're very competitive.
And they've made actually very, very strong inroads in a lot of European markets, where the price of gasoline and the regulatory climate, et cetera, make it more desirable to have an electric car. So, if you're here, I think electric cars are still competing with gasoline cars. In a lot of EU countries, electric cars are far and away more desirable to have for a lot of reasons. And so then it becomes more of a which electric car to buy. And the Chinese cars are doing very, very well in that competitive market.
Right. No, yeah. I know. We're not even remotely competitive. And, Tesla's the only one that's competitive, and, they've driven the cost down fairly significantly. But, globally, no, the Chinese are definitely far more competitive when it comes to this. Yeah, and then they own a lot of supply chain and everything else. And, they own the rare earth metals, all key things that are needed to build these vehicles. And yeah, we're not even close.
No, and to be honest, at the risk of upsetting any Tesla fans out there, I think Tesla had a very commanding lead in terms of innovation and technology that they've lost even to other American manufacturers. Like other US manufacturers are producing some very, very compelling and well thought out electric cars. Just no one's buying them right now.
No, 100%. And, just tying this back to AI just a little bit, because you and I can rip on all this stuff for a while. It goes back to competitiveness. And, is our regulatory infrastructure in this country preventing us from making the progress that we need to make? And that's what scares me. We are a engine of ideas, and we've always been the engine of innovation for the entire world. But our regulatory has gotten so out of control. I think it's gotten so out of control. Or is it going to slow things down so much to make us not competitive? And that's not a question. You look empirically. You look at Europe, which is struggling massively with innovation. It's highly, highly regulated. Has done nothing with AI, to speak about. And I don't want that to happen here, I guess is my point.
I hear you. I wonder though, because right now we have very, very little regulation that is AI specific, right? We have some state level regulations. We had the White House executive order, which has been largely neutralized. So we're sort of in the wild frontier of a relatively regulation-free AI landscape. Now, not saying that we didn't have other laws. There are monopoly and antitrust laws. There's copyright laws. There's other forms of legal liabilities. But we don't have much, as far as I can tell, that is AI specific.
Well, we have one, actually. And we'd spoken about it a couple weeks ago, SB 53 out of California, which California, given its size and where most of the tech companies are located, actually has domestic implications. And that one, and we'd spoken about, was talk about poorly written. And that's an epic nightmare if that ever comes to, and it's signed into law. If they have to abide by that, it's going to be a nightmare.
Well, it certainly, I think a lot of people are concerned about what AI is doing to, them, to society, to jobs. And so there's probably a groundswell of support in some corners to have more regulation. And look, I blame the industry on a lot of this too. I think the AI industry, you and I have been talking about responsible AI as a concept since we started our company and since we started this podcast. And yet I see, look, I hate to say it, but I see continuously vastly careless and irresponsible behavior out of some of the large AI companies out there, right? Sam Altman has made time after time has made it clear that he is against regulation, but he's also against self-policing. He, just announced a few days ago that he wants to enable generation of erotic content on
Yeah, I saw that.
OpenAI.
I
And
saw
yet
that.
he's somehow saying, oh, don't worry, trust us. We'll make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. We'll make sure that kids don't get access to it, and you don't need to regulate us. Right?
I know.
If that was coming from an organization that had shown significant regard for safety and responsibility, that would be one thing. But coming from an organization that has made move fast and break things their motto, that carries zero credibility and zero weight with me. So I think, as brilliant as Sam Altman is, he has to stand up and take a lot of blame for people's angst and concern about what AI is going to do to our kids, our society, our jobs, etc. Look, it's really easy. If you don't want someone to make rules for you, then set your own rules and behave according to those rules. And our industry has not yet done that.
No, they're all about market grab. It's all about market share right now. He's grabbing everything he can grab. I mean, you see how they're trying to get into every single organization, and they're going now even further, and trying to embed into e-commerce systems. They're going to be direct competitors to Google and Amazon. No, he is all about building the next multi-trillion-dollar U.S. company. He's not concerned about anything else. That's eminently clear to me.
No, he's, like, I hate to say it, but there's no outward signs that company is concerned about safety, ethics, or societal impact. Just is what it is. Now, I'm sure on the flip side of it, if you take a purely capitalist approach, you'd say, well, that's not their job, right? Their job is making tools, and they don't have to worry about how people use those tools. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think it's more nuanced.
Yeah, no, it's always more nuanced than that. I think you're right. You could take the fully libertarian view of, you know what, I'm going to put it out there. People do whatever they want. It's up to them. They can make their own decisions. It's not, like you said, it's not quite that simple. It never is. And he is very, very, very aggressive. And at some point, something's going to happen and things are going to be imposed, which I don't think is a good idea. So, because when they get imposed, they're never the way you want them, and they're 10 times more onerous than you would have gotten had you just done it yourself.
I learned that as a kid growing up. It took me a while, right? I had to make a few mistakes and get grounded a few times and have some new rules imposed on me. But eventually I figured out that if you just keep your own nose clean, it's better than having someone else make rules for you.
100%. I agree.
Yeah.
It's right now there's obviously a battle out there. It'll be interesting to see where it turns out. I just hope in our rush to regulate, we don't kill the baby before it's been born. That's my, because whatever you want to say about AI, it's still in its infancy. It still has. You've only really you're at the periphery. I mean, this stuff is all important, but we're still at the periphery of what its capabilities lie and what it could do. I mean, we haven't even begun to embed this in organizations. That's a 10, 15-year journey, which most orgs I don't think even have their minds wrapped around yet. If they really want to truly get the value out of that, we're at the very, very beginnings of this, and I think that you got to be cognizant of that.
Well, Peter, it did not escape my notice that you slipped in a very clever segue a few seconds ago when you mentioned that OpenAI was going to take on Amazon and others in the retailing space. So I opened the door. Go ahead, drive through it. Let's talk about that.
I don't know how I feel about this, to be totally honest, but Amazon...
And what is it? Yeah.
So OpenAI and Walmart have embarked upon a close partnership that, if you're sitting there chatting and you're looking for a product in OpenAI and ChatGPT, and you find something that you like, you can press the buy button. It's not out yet, but it will be. And you can buy it through ChatGPT. So you've now gone around Amazon and Google, you've sidestepped all of them. You're using ChatGPT as your shopping engine. So now it's becoming a shopping tool. And they'll put a buy button there. You'll click on the buy button. It'll allow you to, do whatever you got to do. They created something called Agentic Commerce Protocol, so that if you're a vendor and you want to put yourself on ChatGPT, you can do that. So now it's becoming a shopping interface. I don't know if I like that. I kind of have trouble with it. I don't know why. It just seems to, in some respects, I understand why they would do it. I just think it cheapens what they're building. But who am I to say?
That rubs me the wrong way. And again, I think, look, technically it's nothing new under the sun. There's no reason you couldn't use MCP, Model Context Protocol, already to, expose an agent that would complete a transaction, a purchasing transaction for you. But here's why it rubs me the wrong way. I want to be able to go to an AI tool. I want to use it to do research. I already know that I don't trust a simple search because there are now too many paid ads and too much obscurity to the way that the page rank algorithm works. And so like if I do a Google and I say, what's the best widget, right? I don't know. So I know if I go to any number of different AI tools, I can say, hey, give me some research. Tell me the top 5 widgets in this category, compare and contrast them and look up some recent reviews and give me recommendations, right? And I can say, and here are my criteria. So I can get a much more in-depth and tailored and maybe not 100% impartial, but closer to impartial review. And let me be clear. It's relying on content generated by people who might be biased anyway, so it's not completely objective. But I'm not getting an additional layer of bias injected by the AI engine, right? It's aggregating what people said. As soon as you tell me that I have the option to, if I'm comparing 5 widgets and one of them has an option where I can also hit the buy it right now button in that chat agent, I am immediately going to be nervous that I've lost the objectivity, that there's some under the covers hidden algorithm that is somehow promoting that one, because obviously if the AI agent has a buy button, they're getting a percentage of that purchase, right? They're making money off that. And so how can we just talked about the extreme profit driven above all else mentality of some of these companies? How in the world am I ever going to trust that they're not manipulating the results of that AI powered analysis to promote the product that they make extra money on if I buy it? I would just never trust it. There is literally nothing OpenAI could say to me that would make me believe that they were being completely unbiased and honest if they have that capability in my chat. I just would not believe it, because the amount of money they could make by steering people towards those purchases is just too great to turn down.
Again, I think he's trying to build a multi-trillion-dollar company as fast as possible. And don't get me wrong, I like ChatGPT. I don't want to, diss him totally, but I agree with you. I don't like it. I like when I saw this the other day, I was like, I don't like this. It rubs me the wrong way on so many different levels. And you articulated it perfect. I think that's exactly why the cheesiness factor really bugs me. I don't know what it is. It's just my gut feeling, my raw, just like, this is bad. There's nothing good about this. And now I'm going to go on ChatGPT, and what's next? Advertisements? I feel like we're going down that path where now I look at it as a powerful research tool and, being able to use it in many different ways. Now I'm going to go shopping on it. I don't want to do that. It's not what it's for.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, or specifically me, I've been sort of busting Sam Altman's chops and complaining about OpenAI a little bit this morning. But I'll say, look, I love ChatGPT as a tool.
So
I admire what they've created. I deeply distrust some of their policies and motivations. I think they haven't been a very transparent and not a particularly responsible seeming company, but I still have deep admiration for what they've built and for their capabilities.
Their capabilities are tremendous. It's funny, you and I talk about them a lot, but there are others out there I think that are really good as well. I mean, look, ChatGPT is the first. It's obviously has the lead at everybody else, but I find Claude excellent for a lot of what I do. I occasionally, pivot to Gemini, which I also find very good. And then I hate to say, look, whatever you think of Musk, the Groq one is also extraordinarily fast. And for a number of other applications, I find it very good, especially for code generation. So it's got its pros and they all have their pros and their cons, I guess is what I'm saying. But
I
he's
can't
just the
make
one that's out.
myself. I can't make myself spend any time with Groq. I just can't do it. I can't.
I understand. I would say I spend 90% of my time these days between, actually 100% of my time between Claude and OpenAI. Occasionally I'll pivot to Gemini or Groq, but most of my time is spent with both. And honestly, given a lot of the work I do, I find Claude generally is better at what I do, especially with writing and stuff. That's why I like it better. But I usually use both of them. I usually compare and contrast. I go back and forth quite a bit. So
Yeah, and that's a really important point. Like people always say to me, "What model should I use?" I'm like, that's not even a legitimate question. Unfortunately, it's what should I use for this use case, given that these are my goals, my constraints, my priorities, etc. Right?
Right. Exactly.
Like you, I'll use different models for different things.
100%.
And I was talking to someone the other day, and they sort of raised an eyebrow at me when I said, look, the goal also is to find the cheapest, least capable model that will give you
Yes.
acceptable results when you're doing.
Yes.
Now, maybe
Yes.
not
Yes.
if you're using it on a personal level and you're writing, you're using it 3-4 times a day. Well, sure, use the biggest, baddest model, because if you're paying $20 a month, that's fine.
Right.
But if you're using it in a more commercial setting and you're using it extensively and you're paying for that usage, let's say you're beyond the place where even your $200 a month subscription covers you, right? You're paying by the token. You should be looking for the best fit for your use case. And it doesn't mean the most powerful model. It just means the one that the smallest, cheapest model that gives you acceptable results.
Right. You and I have been an advocate of small language models for a long time, for a whole number of reasons. Obviously they're easy to train, fine tune, but the cost, the value is just there. And you don't need a big, massive foundation model all the time. It's just too much. It's overkill and expensive.
Yeah, in fact, I was doing some stuff the other day where I was happened to be using Claude, and I started using Haiku. Usually, I think my Claude client defaults to Sonnet, and obviously it's a little bit larger and heavier. And I was very pleasantly surprised that for what I was doing, for the types of tasks I was doing, Haiku is giving me just as good output as I was getting from Sonnet. And Haiku is a much smaller model.
No, you're right. I think mine falls to Sonnet 4.5. And occasionally I go to Opus for some tasks, and that's a much bigger, heavier model. Sonnet gives me, and I haven't fallen to Haiku. I tend to use the other models, but Sonnet gives me great, fast results, and it's their general purpose model.
Yep. All right. So I think we came down the side of, I don't think either one of us will be excited to see the integration of commerce into a chat engine, AI-powered chat engine. I hope it doesn't really take off and become a thing, because if it does, that first of all, it's not going to be, while Walmart is partnering with OpenAI, if that's successful, everyone's going to hop on, and they're all going to have different cost structures and different ways that they share revenue with whoever runs the models, and it's just going to be a whole murky. It's funny because that's the reason that people no longer trust pure web search for buying decisions, because they are distrustful of what advertising and product placement and other revenue sharing agreements do to the search algorithm. And they'd be introducing the same thing into AI if they did that.
And that's a legitimate concern. At the end of the day, it's a very legitimate concern. Yeah, and it's interesting to see, just competitively, what is this going to do to Amazon and Google, and is it going to have any implications on their businesses? That remains obviously to be seen, but clearly he's gunning for both of them.
It's funny because I was reading something the other day that there are some people talking about, should we have public large language models? In other words, large language models that are created by public entities or nonprofits that are sort of intended for personal, non-commercial use and are built with curated data and known data sets and et cetera, et cetera. And I think, it's an attractive idea. I think you start looking at what it would actually take to do it and who would you trust to do it. And it falls apart very quickly.
Yeah, that's a fool's errand, I think, trying to, and remember something, OpenAI is still a nonprofit.
Yeah, well, yes.
And it was founded
I forget
precisely on those premises, is that it would be an open AI model. It was meant to be open.
They're just a nonprofit that is behaving like a for-profit and is in the process of trying to create a for-profit subsidiary. Yes.
Yeah.
So and who would ever be able to fund? I mean, how would you get the funding to develop one of these models from scratch as a public domain model?
No. I mean, there's a couple of them on Hugging Face that are bigger in nature, but they're not even remotely competitive to anything that's out there in the commercial space. Yeah, I mean, the amount of money you need, as well as I do, given the size of the models these days, runs into the many hundreds of millions of dollars. This is not something you spin up on your laptop, that's for sure.
And even then, how would you do it in a way that people actually trusted what you're doing? Right,
you got to articulate every single piece of data that's in there, and the process of cleaning it up and what's there and what's not there. And, you just, it's not practical in the nonprofit space, I think, to do that. Unless there's some huge benefactor out there that wants to write a multi-billion-dollar check and say, go.
So let's shift gears a little bit. This is something we have mentioned in passing before on the podcast, which is that there's this disturbing trend, I'll say, of companies spend a lot of time considering which AI provider they want to sign up with. Do they want to have a Google Gemini tool available to their employees? Do they want to have Copilot? Do they want to go direct to OpenAI for ChatGPT or any of the others available? Do they want to have a corporate Claude plan, etc.? And they agonize over this for a long time. They sign up for one. They pour potentially millions of dollars into procuring licenses for everybody. And then they sit back and they wait for the profits to come rolling in.
Yeah,
and 6 or 8 months later, they feel like, well, nothing's changed. And then they say to us, like, what did we do wrong? Like, we did what we're supposed to do. We rolled out these tools and nothing's happening. Why is that? Why is that, Peter? What do you tell them?
All right, so Peter gets on his soapbox now and waxes philosophical for a little while. How do we get here? Which I will take a bit of credit. You and I actually predicted this way back when. I think, look, there's obviously a number of reasons here. I think, probably I'll blame the tool providers. They pushed these tools as if they were magic, and it was all of a sudden everything was going to be easy. And it is not reality by any stretch of the imagination. They confused adoption with transformation, and it's certainly not the case. You don't, because you give it, go back to my favorite quote, a fool with the tool is still a fool. And these are powerful, powerful, powerful tools. Giving somebody a tool doesn't make them smarter, doesn't make them use it any better. It doesn't allow the organization to transform. Does none of that whatsoever. I think what it's exposing at many, 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 many levels is how organizations are just so ill prepared for this. And they lack not only the mindset to make the transformation and what it requires, and they've taken this very simplistic view of what these tools are capable of doing. And not just, look, I think, let me be clear, AI is a broader term than generative AI. What you're familiar with ChatGPT is generative AI. The broader term or the application of artificial intelligence in general is much broader and will have a bigger, broader implications. I'm sorry, most have not wrapped their mind around that. Most organizations don't know how to do a digital transformation. Most don't have the internal skills, don't know how to transform their organization and do any of that stuff. So now they got a funky tool that's very powerful that I will argue in many cases is not only not giving them return on their investment, it's actually worse than that. They're losing money because they're spending all this money and they're deploying it to everybody and they're just generating more crap, not making them necessarily better.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points to me is that they roll out the tool and they expect magic to happen. And they're spending, significant amounts of money. $30 a head per month per person doesn't sound like a tremendous amount of money. And I'm just using 30 arbitrarily. That's an average cost for some of these tools. You can pay more, you can pay less, but let's pretend it's $30 per user. But if you have thousands of people working in your organization, you're paying $360 per year, that adds up pretty quickly to a substantial investment over a multi-year period. And yet, you're giving people these tools and you're not spending nearly that much teaching them how to use those tools, teaching them how to do their job and apply the technology to their job, how to use them effectively, honestly, efficiently, responsibly. I would argue that $30 a month should be, in at least the first year of your rollout, you should be spending double that per person in terms of training and cultural transformation and giving people, when I say training, I'm not talking just about technical skills, not like how to write a good prompt. I'm talking about how to understand the data that your organization uses and how to know how to bring that data into a tool and what to do with it and how to interrogate data to decide if it's good or trustworthy or relevant, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's a whole list of skills that people must have to get real gains out of this tool.
Yeah, no. There's the whole pillar of deploying it is just data and understanding how do you get your data into these tools and use it effectively. But a thought cropped into my head when you were speaking. Prompt engineers. Organizations like to pay prompt engineers exorbitant amounts of money to go write a prompt, which I look at and I've always thought from the very beginning, this is kind of wild. Why am I hiring somebody and paying $300,000-$400,000 to go write a prompt? And the reality is, I would take that $300,000 or $400,000 a year. I would train a slew of people to go do it themselves. That to
Yes.
me is a far more effective way of doing it. Instead of, well, I'm going to patch the problem with I'm going to create a problem. I'm sorry, one prompt engineer. What's he going to do? How many prompts is he going to write in a day? And chances are he's going to use AI to write the prompts that he's writing. So I'd rather teach people how to do this the right way.
Prompt engineering, here's the way I say it sometimes. Prompt engineering is a thing, but it is a skill, not a job.
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly.
Typing is a thing, but you don't hire typists anymore. We all use keyboards and we type on them, right? Like prompt engineer is a skill. It's not a job that you hire someone to do.
Yes, 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 and yes. And I think organizations, their knee-jerk reaction is, and let's ask a couple of questions as to why we do this. One, because most companies funnel JI through IT, okay, which I think is a bad idea. I said it from the very beginning. They always give it to the CIO. Wrong move. A lot of CIOs out there, you might not agree with what I say, but it comes down to control. You want to control, 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 and control, and it works. It's backwards. And the other thing too, and I will say this, and you and I have been on so many of these phone calls, I feel like, who do we talk to? Lawyers and compliance people.
Right, right. And look, to your point, if the CIO is responsible for the rollout of AI tools, you have already failed. You don't know it yet, but you have failed. And if you are abdicating entire responsibility to legal and compliance, you are likely going to fail because you need a balanced approach where you take into consideration the risks and the potential rewards, and you come up with the right processes and the right controls to minimize those risks. Well, because if you take the zero risk approach, we know where that leads. Zero risk will also be zero productivity.
Exactly.
Every aspect of business entails some degree of risk. Like the first thing you learn working in a bank is risk management is not about eliminating risk. Risk management is about identifying it, monitoring it, controlling it, and testing it. But there is an inherent level of risk. I mean, every board in a bank has a risk tolerance. That's a policy every bank has where they have to state their risk tolerance for various kinds of risk. And if the risk tolerance was zero, you wouldn't have to state it. So, but people miss that with AI. They're like, oh, we want to avoid all risk. No, that's not the way it works.
But you're right. You're 100% right. Most, again, I'll bucket them. I hate this. I'm not dissing lawyers and compliance folks. There's a real job there. But if that's your first stop on deployment, it's not a good first stop because you're trying to regulate something that you don't really understand yet. And you're certainly going to err on the side of a lot of risk, a lot of control. And there are organizations out there who will say, it's just getting through our attorneys now. This is years later. It's still getting through attorneys now. This stuff has been out for 3 years. So I
agree
find
with you. Risk and compliance belong at the table. They should be part of your process, but
100%.
Like, don't turn this over to them. Don't go to them first and say, tell me what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So you actually bring up a good point. I want to ask you about this. So what is who's at that table?
That's a great question. I think first of all, the CEO should be at the table in almost all companies. It is this technology is that transformational that the CEO needs to be, if not in the working group, which is probably not reasonable, but needs to be an active and invisible sponsor and supporter of this initiative, right? That has to happen, I think. I think the most important role at the table are two roles. I think number one is the business sponsor of this initiative. There needs to be clear business authority, not technology, but business driven authority to roll this out. I can't talk today. And I think the other needs to be, you need someone who's actually a transformation leader. You need someone who is going to look at this, not as a technology rollout, not as a new tool, but as a cultural and organizational and process transformation, where the tool is one of the things that's driving that transformation, but this is a much broader transformation. And then
and I think
everybody else belongs at the table, but those are like the key roles that have to be there first.
And I'll add one thing to that, and I think you're absolutely right. Everything you said is what skills are required. At least the questions they should be asking themselves. If you're sitting at the table, do we even have the skills to do this? And really do this the right way. And like most places, the answer is probably a no. And what do we do to get there? Otherwise, any kind of implementation rollout, otherwise, I think is fundamentally flawed.
So it's actually a really interesting point. I'm thinking about this a little bit, and I'm wondering out loud? Do you need the skills, or do you need the willingness to get the skills and the willingness to deal with the problems? And the reason I say that is we also talk frequently about how rolling out AI in a business area will often force you to modify the business process. If you're going to automate a process, you probably are going to change and improve that process along the way. And I think a lot of organizations go into this lacking that fundamental willingness to unpack and rebuild some of their core processes. They just want AI to seamlessly sit on top of the processes and not disrupt or change anything. So I know I bundled a whole lot of things in there, but I'm like, I feel like maybe one of the ingredients is like, you have to be courageous enough to say, yep, this is going to hurt a little bit, and we're going to have to rework some processes as well as just retraining people. It's not just a, pretty layer on top of our company.
No, I think you're 110% correct. You need the willingness. You need the willingness to break things. You have to go in there knowing that things are going to break in order to get better. I also think, and these just might be side by side and go hand in hand, is you need to be educated so you know the realm of the possibility. You can't go in there blind not knowing the capabilities. If you know the capabilities, then all of a sudden the realm of what you can do opens up dramatically, and then followed by you have to have the willingness, now that you know, to go break all this stuff to make it better, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. There's probably one other person we should stipulate sitting around that virtual table, and that is the person who is responsible for responsible AI or AI safety and ethics, right? And that could be a responsibility that one of those other people bears, but it should be an explicit responsibility, and that should be part of every conversation.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think that person needs to be at the table. It's funny because I think when you and I started out, I was very suspicious of all that. You know me, I'm very suspicious of anything like that. But I think in the time that you and I have been working together, almost going on 2 years, I have definitely changed my views and recognize that is something that is mandatory. You need to have that, certainly a seat at the table. You need to be aware. You need to put some processes in place or controls in place. You just can't be freewheeling it all the time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about one other aspect of this challenge for companies. And here's something I said to someone last week. I was meeting with some business leaders last week, and one of the things I said was, almost everything that you can do with AI that creates real significant business value, none of that is going to happen through a chat interface. It's going to happen through an API, right? And if any of you listening aren't speaking API, I just mean it's going to happen by embedding AI models into automated processes and applications and other automated functions within the business. It's not going to be a human typing a prompt and getting an answer, whether that human's an employee or a customer. It's going to be embedding this AI deeply into your processes. So that's the other part that people miss. Like, great, you gave people a chat tool as a way to access AI. The real value unlock is when you embed that into your business process, and it's not people interacting with it, it's your applications and your data interacting with it.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely correct. And I think that goes unspoken about. Everybody thinks it's all about generative AI and using these models, and it's really not. And there are other ways to get a lot of regular AI will have enormous value in and of itself.
Yes.
And deploying it. You don't need the complexity of a foundation model, and working with OpenAI or any of these other companies, you can do some of this yourself, just developing your own AI models.
It's interesting because I think one of the things that we noticed early on that was part of the popularity of ChatGPT when it was released is it was, for most individuals, it was the first form of AI that they could actually interact with directly. For most people, their exposure to AI came in the form of like a Netflix movie recommendation, Amazon book recommendation, right? It was something behind the scenes, or it was something they didn't even know about. Like it might have been part of a, credit application process or something, or a job screening when you submit a resume, totally invisible to the human. And suddenly you've got this, this living, breathing thing that you can type messages to in a chat box and interact with. And I think it's gotten people, back to your point, it's gotten people to where we've almost forgotten that we've had AI for a long time, but that AI we didn't interact with it that way. We built those models into applications and processes, and we can build generative AI models into applications and processes too. And that's where the value is, whether it's traditional AI or Gen AI. That's where the real value at a corporate level is going to be.
When I first started working with neural nets and I was building models on TensorFlow, and this is pre-LLM days, and that's how I built models. When I was building an equity research platform, I was building TensorFlow models
remember
using
TensorFlow
available.
days.
Yeah, exactly. And just for the audience who don't really appreciate and understand this, a generative AI model at its core is just a neural net, either built on TensorFlow or PyTorch, or usually one of the two, that's been trained with a massive corpus of information. That's what it is. That's really all it is at the end of the day. And we forget that. But, when I started out, I was spinning up TensorFlow models and I was coding Keras and I was deploying them. That's what I was doing.
Yep.
Small, yes, but that's what I was doing.
Did you start with the iris classification tutorial in TensorFlow? Do you remember that one? It was like one of the earliest tutorials I ever
everybody
saw.
Started with that one. Yes.
Classifying different varieties of irises based on the dimensions of their petals and the stems and pistils of the flowers.
That one, and then it was the numeric one too, where you had the numbers and you had to do the number recognition. And that was just a convolutional neural network. That was just a traditional neural network. I did. That's how you started. That's how I was coding up.
If you really want to throw back the earliest days of relational databases, the one touchstone that every data architect from those days has is the puppy farm model. There was this whole example of how to achieve third normal form and what first normal, second normal, third and fourth and fifth normal form looked like. And they used a puppy farm as the example. It was really funny. There was actually a poster. I think IBM or someone produced a wall-sized poster that a lot of DBAs had in their cubes back in the 80s that were about the puppy farm model to illustrate database normalization.
Are we on the "How old are we" segment of the podcast when we talk about the things that we did 40 years ago?
And next week, I will bring my punch card collection to the podcast.
Hey, look, I learned to do SQL on a VAX. That's how I learned it when it first came out. So,
Peter, no one even knows what a VAX is who's listening to this, I think.
I think you're probably right. Absolutely. No, they most definitely do not know what a VAX is, and that's probably not a bad thing. It's better just to go look it up in an encyclopedia. Oh, wait, I don't know what those are anymore. Go look it up on Wikipedia.
Exactly. Well, look, I think this is a message I don't see us ever letting up on this until it takes root, which is there is so much more to achieving value out of AI than just deploying chat tools. And by the way, this isn't just us saying it. If you actually look at what companies are doing that's really transformational, and it's early days and it's a small section of companies, but this is where companies are really using AI.
Yeah.
The ones who are getting a return on investment, the ones who know are doing two things. One, they're embedding AI into their business processes, not just rolling out chat tools as personal and productivity enhancements to their workforce. And two, and you said this, they are using all forms of AI. They're not just restricting themselves to generative AI.
So you say something I think is really important. I want to kind of latch on to it really quick. Organizations that do the transformation really well have much more traditional statistical analysis, predictive analytics groups. It's much more embedded into their organizations, that mindset and that type of thinking. At least that's what I've seen. Would you agree?
I think so. I think it gives them some level of experience with, if not AI, at least with some forms of machine learning and data science. It gives them some appreciation for the role data plays in this, and probably just generally they have at least some group of people somewhere that have some scientific rigor, if you want to call it that, about the way that they solve problems.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I can be completely wrong, but just an observation. Who knows? We'll see.
I mean, I generally think that's right because they tend to be companies that value people with those skills. And so they probably have some of those people in-house already. And this is maybe another area where companies who are hiring prompt engineers only are going to run into trouble, which is you can hire someone who knows how to write a prompt. But if that but that doesn't mean you've also got anyone who understands data and data architecture and data quality. It doesn't mean you've got anyone who understands traditional AI. It doesn't mean you have anyone who understands how AI actually works under the covers, generative AI included. It doesn't mean you have anyone who knows how to integrate AI into your APIs and your systems and your business processes. And it certainly doesn't mean you have anyone who's taking an eye towards responsible AI or organizational transformation. So like, yeah, you can go hire some of the right prompts for you. Hire an army of typists. You can hire all the typists you want in the world, and it doesn't mean your annual reports can contain better information.
Well, it's not. Quite the opposite, actually.
By the way, I am a pretty good typist. How about you?
I'm a pretty good typist. I mean, I'm not as good as I used to be because I don't know why I used to be really good. Because I actually learned how to type on a typewriter in sixth grade.
AI brain rot. You've been dictating too much into AI.
I used to be able to type 100 words a minute. I can't do that anymore. And at one point, you're going to laugh. When I was working in one of my jobs when I was much younger, I was so keen on typing faster, I went and bought a Dvorak keyboard because it would make me type faster. Now, mind you, all the keystrokes on Unix don't really map to a Dvorak keyboard really well. So things that are nice and easy on a regular QWERTY keyboard don't work. But I did it. I managed, and I actually typed a lot faster.
I'm going to show you my weird keyboard here. Hold on a second. You're going to love this. So in the quest for ever more efficiency, I even went and got a 2-part keyboard, which I'm trying to learn to use. It literally
those
looks like this.
I don't like
two
those.
Separate parts.
I have a I've seen those before. I tried the Microsoft one a bunch of times. I just don't like it. I find it very natural.
It's a learning curve. It's a learning curve.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, the Dvorak keyboard was a huge learning curve too, but I find it unnatural to type that way. I don't know. I just do. Not my style.
In a example of how I'll say ahead of my time I don't think I was actually ahead of my time. I was just lucky. But when I was in high school, I actually took a typing course, and this, of course, was in the early '80s, and so it was very unusual for a male to take a typing course. Unfortunately, right? We still had some real gender stereotypes at play, and no one can understand why I took it. They were like, "Why are you taking a typing course? You're going to go to college, aren't you?" And I was like, yeah, that's exactly why I'm taking a typing course. I'm going to work with computers. Of course, no one had a computer. And so they thought it was crazy that I took typing. But and I got pretty good at it. And I will say I was the only kid in my dorm freshman year who brought a giant 100-pound IBM Selectric to campus to type my term papers on.
That's funny, actually. That is funny.
I would love to have one of those today. What a great machine those were.
So I learned my mother had gotten a typewriter in, oh God, I want to say it's like a 1960 old, and I have it. I remember I showed it to you. I have an old typewriter, and it works. I still type on it. It's not great, but it works. But that's what I learned to type on as a kid. And then at some point, I'm like you, I was a little crazy as a kid. I was into computers at some ridiculously young age, and I just wanted to type. They went and bought me, like you, a big IBM Selectric keyboard that I actually used, and I loved it. It was great. I had an electric typewriter. I was the kid in grammar school bringing my papers in all typed, and teachers are like, "Who are you? What are you doing?"
The only problem with the Selectrics is they were so powerful and they worked so fast with that rotating ball head, but you could hear them. You could hear the impact of the typing like 2 floors away. Like it was
loud.
They were so heavy, and they made this boom, 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 thud sound.
Those things were so over-engineered.
Yeah. I also have a small collection of antique manual typewriters. So if anyone out there listening discovers a vintage 1920s through maybe 1950s manual typewriter, let me know. I'm always looking to add great ones to the collection.
Oh, I love the old typewriters. They're awesome, those things. It kind of takes you back.
Yeah. And that's, AI. So foreshadowing to one of our guests, we're going to be spending some time talking with one of our guests about like, what are the essentially human qualities that AI just is never going to be able to replace, right? And
right.
I can have the greatest keyboard in the world and the most powerful software and the most powerful hardware, but there is nothing better than occasionally sitting down, and whether you're using a pen that you like or an old typewriter or something, just that physical reconnection with the process of writing a message or a paper or a note.
I couldn't agree with you more. So you're going to laugh at this one. I didn't mean to cut you off, but so I went out a while ago, and I haven't embarked on it, but I have all the lessons on how to do penmanship again, because I forgot how to do a lot of penmanship. And I'm like, it's one of those skills that's a great mind-hand connection. It's good for you cognitively just in general, but that wasn't why I did it. Because as a kid, I used to do calligraphy. I loved that. I taught myself how to do calligraphy as a kid. Another one of my when I was like, seventh grade, sixth grade, I love beautiful handwriting, and I was never great at handwriting. So I went and bought myself penmanship exercise. I go do it. I'm like,
That's
but back to what you
that's
said, it's
great.
just that I love stuff like that.
It's relaxing, it's therapeutic, it's a craft, and it's really good, I think, to get our brains focused on physical things too, so we're not just entirely living in a silicon world.
Yep,
Yeah.
100%. And it's, this day and age, it's really good that have that mind body connection too. And it helps you as you get older also, not to bother, but it does. Just good for your brain.
No, very good. Well, having said that, I think I have emptied my brain of all my thoughts this morning. We've talked about a lot.
Yes. We have.
It's always a fun chat,
Always a pleasure.
Peter.
Yes.
And I think the next time we talk, we will be talking with one of our guests. So
I think this will be. I'm pretty sure.
Actually, I'm not sure what order these will be broadcast in, but it's coming up very soon. The next time you and I record a session, we'll be doing it live with one of our guests. So that's going to be great.
Yeah, that's going to be great. Actually, I'm looking forward to that. And like I said, a nice, real, it's a studio. It's actually a music studio. It's not even just a podcasting studio, though they have podcasting as well. It's a real music studio. And apparently it's a famous one. So it should be really cool to be doing this live.
Should I bring my guitar? Should I sing? What shall I do?
I heard rumors some famous people have showed up, and you never know, they might join us.
That would be hilarious. Okay, the real problem is it would also be very embarrassing because there's a good chance that someone famous showed up. I wouldn't even know who they were.
You and I wouldn't even know who they were. There's a really good chance that would happen.
Yeah.
You're who?
Oh,
I'm
well.
sorry. Well, I just kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. These kids probably know about you, but I couldn't tell you, couldn't pick you out of a lineup. Anyway.
Exactly. Well, with that, I guess it must be time for my mid-morning nap.
Yes, I'm sure. And I know, and I hope everybody has a great day. And thank you again for listening to Call Me Dad.
All right.
Thank you, David.
Bye,
have a good
everyone.
day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us over on YouTube. And make sure to stay up to date with us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well.